Here we go.
There we are.
Welcome. I am Baron Guillermo de Cervantes of the Kingdom of Trimaris. My homeland is the Shire of Southkeep, also known as Miami. And today we are going to do a fascinating subject on the virtues of chivalry. Uh, Sir Severin, could you please give us an introduction of
Uh,
yourself?
sure. Sir Severin Visconti di Milano, I'm in Marcaster, Trimaris. Um, about to celebrate my 31st year as a knight. It's been a while. Joined the SCA when I was 15, so going on my 43rd year in the SCA, and still love it. Pretty much everybody I know, everybody I love, has come from this group. So I'm glad to see everybody joining here. So today we're going to cover a subject near and dear to my heart. It's chivalry and the virtues of chivalry. So naturally, I joined, was fighting for years and years, and you just fight because it's fun. You have a great time with your friends. Then you start to getting a little older. You get, and start enjoying history and things like that. Well, a couple of things definitely influenced my life. My friend, who was a squire at the time and eventually became my knight, Ben and McTeer, very much into the virtues and chivalry and the history of that. It's kind of our religion at this point. And a friend of ours, Earl Brian Thornbird, um, or Brian Price, you may know him. He writes a lot of books. He's a great armorer. He's got a tournament company. It, he's very much into the tournament lifestyle, and he's made things much more beautiful in the SCA with a lot of his things. Oh my goodness, my knight's here. I better be good. So part of it's his fault. So I like to go cover some of the stuff that I've enjoyed over the years. I'm kind of lean heavily on Raymond Lull. He was a hermit knight. We don't know a lot about what he did during his, knight years. But once he was done, he went off and became a hermit, and squires and knights went to him for his wisdom. And he wrote a lot of things about knighthood and chivalry and the virtues. So I have a theory, and my theory is entirely unfounded and unproven, but it kind of makes sense to me. So the way I view religion, religion to me was, created so that people don't, you know, harm other people. You're not robbing, murdering, stealing, raping, none of that stuff. It gives you the thought of, I'm not going to get into like, the beliefs and all that, but it keeps people from doing these things because they believe that, there's an afterlife and there's reasons you do good. When the Crusades came along, and again, this is just my theory, kind of gave knights carte blanche. There's like, you're a knight and you're a knight of God. So you're pretty much free to do whatever you want. So they went off and they raped and pillaged and killed and things like that in the name of God. And I kind of think the virtues came around to go, okay, we got to rein these guys in a little bit. They're really powerful. They're the strongest fighters we have in the world, and they can do pretty much whatever we want. So we need to give them a guideline, and we need to make it so that it's important to them. It's not it's not rules that we're imposing on them. It's rules that they're imposing on themselves. And a lot of great writers have covered over the centuries, but Lull is kind of my favorite. Um, I love Charnay too, Joffrey de Charnay. Charnay gets into more of the actual mechanics of being a knight. He did a series of questions on the joust, on tournaments, and on war. And if he was around nowadays, we would call him a rules lawyer because he asked you things like, well, if a squire knocks the knight off his horse in this kind of tournament, does he get to keep that horse? It's like, okay, we'll discuss that. But to me, Lull was a little more spiritual. So first thing I want to do, I'm going to read from, I'm not going to do a lot of reading, a lot of discussing, but I'm going to read from Brian Price's Book of the Tournament. It's a fantastic book. I got as many copies as I could. I like to give it out at very, very special vigils. Um, so chapter towards the end, he discussed really what makes a knight. And the great thing about this book is Brian took information from Lull and from Charnay and from other sources, and he put it in context of the SCA. And we all have spoken to people that are in the SCA, and they kind of look down on it. They're like, I'm in the SCA, but it's not that great. Brian loved the SCA, and he treated it with great respect. And he wrote this book from the point of view of people who want to be knights in the SCA. So I'll read what he wrote here. The knightly candidate must comport himself as a gentleman in arms. That is to say, that he must bear himself with nobility and with honor, be skilled in the arts of war, of tourneying, of swordsmanship, of the rules of conduct required for all combatants. He must contribute to the chivalric tone of the tournament and must be considered an asset to the order. Very important. As such, he must display skills and knowledge expected of a well-rounded gentleman. And a true gentleman should know both the arts of peace and war. As tournament fighting is the dance of war, so should he acquaint himself with the dances of peace, of brawls, of pavans, of galliards, even perhaps of country dances. He should bear knowledge of chess, of heraldry, and as much as he can learn about the period he is from as well. He would be well served to learn a craft as well, for there is much that goes into mastery of a craft which supports a noble and graceful demeanor. Lastly, but mostly importantly, he must have knowledge and practice the courtesies and procedures expected at a civilized court and should be an example of the same. So to me, that kind of encapsulates exactly what we're looking for of a knight in the SCA. So any squires out there and say, well, what do I got to do to become a knight? Those things. Earl Ben in here, he will attest to the things that he made me learn and train in and identify heraldry and dances and all the games. All very important because it all brings parts of the aspects of history, but it also feeds into the whole idea of a peer in the SCA because, again, a peer is someone you're supposed to be able to drop anywhere in the world and they can start a group. If the only thing you know is to fight, then you're not starting an SCA group, you're starting a fighter practice. So from there, I like to roll into the first of all, if anybody has questions, type them in that into the chat box and we'll absolutely get to the questions. You don't have to wait for the end or anything like that. So historically, there's a lot of things that are considered virtues. If you go through history and read through all the books, everybody has their own list of the virtues. You know, this guy has 7, he's got 11, he's got 13. Everybody's got their own list of the virtues. The way Lull works it, there's 3 theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. So faith, whether you're a religious person or not, faith is important to somebody because it means you have something to believe in. If you have nothing to believe in, you're never going to do anything because why would you bother? I have faith in mankind, frankly. And when I go to the SCA, I have faith that people are there to be kind to each other, to entertain each other, basically just to enjoy each other's company and do everything they can to make sure everybody has a great time. That is my faith. Hope, hope kind of ties into that because if you have no hope, again, why would you do anything? If you hope is the idea that you could succeed even if there's all odds are against you. So if you're hopeful, you can succeed. If you're hopeless, we've all met people that we consider hopeless, whether they're hopeless because they're just incapable or hopeless because they've given up completely. It's a terrible place to be. And of course, charity, and I lump mercy under that because Lull doesn't really specify charity as its own virtue, so I consider charity mercy. And I've had many discussions with many knights about mercy. Some of them just think in terms of fighting, and they're like, "Well, why would I give up if I took his arm, why would I give up mine?" It's like that is the slightest version of mercy you could possibly think of. So bringing charity into that, I think, expands the idea of mercy. So if there is somebody that is in need of anything, whether they need shelter or food or guidance or training or advice, to me that all falls under charity. And I think that's if I had to pick one that was the most important, I would pick mercy because I do think that makes us the most human, although they're all very, very important. Then Lull rolls into the 4 cardinal virtues. The first one is justice, and I don't know if it's an exact translation, but the way it's been written in the book, without justice, chivalry may not be. And I see it that way myself. It's like knights have to be just. We have to not only try to dole out justice, which in many cases is not our responsibility, um, but we have to apply justice to ourselves. We have to look at the situation and say, what would be the right thing to do here? Is it the best thing for me? Is it the best thing for my friends and family? Possibly not. But you have to do what is right and just. Um, we've all been in those situations where we had to consider how to be equal, equitable with other people, even though it may be at a disadvantage to yourself. The situations, we can always apply any of these to, SCA fighting, but really we want to apply them to everything in our lives. Like I said, some of us consider this to be our religion as opposed to any organized religion. So in my life, I do like to, make sure I apply justice to all my situations. Prudence, I think, is very important too, and it's not always an easy one to follow. So prudence means you have the knowledge of good and evil, but you also have the grace to be the friend of good. So the first one, not always easy. You can see two people in a situation and you see both of their points of view. When you step back and look at it from, a mile above, you go, wow, okay, what he's trying to do, that is not good. That is not a good thing he wants to do. When you're up close, sometimes it's harder to tell. They're really good at explaining why they need that thing or why this has to happen or why that rule needs to change or why they should be able to use this weapon in this tournament, things like that. When you step back, you got to know. But sometimes even harder is applying that. When you know that something is on the good and right, sometimes it's easier to just sit back and say, well, it'll get worked out or someone else will make sure it happens right. Being in the virtues of chivalry, it's really our position to step up and say, I think this is what's good and I think you should follow this way. Now, it may just be advice. As peers, we are required to be consultants to the crown on their command. So if the king comes to you and says, I think we should do this, knowing your knowledge of good and evil, you may, well, Your Majesty, I'm not sure that's just the best thing to do. So you may not be able to stop it from happening, but you want to be the friend of good. That's why it doesn't say you are the employer of good, you are the hammer of good. You're the friend of good. So you want to step up next to good and say, here's what I think you should do. It's up to you to follow that.
Underlining the word grace.
Where's Grace?
The grace to be a friend of good.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So after prudence, we have temperance. Temperance, again, no virtue is easy to follow completely. So temperance is balance in all things, which it sounds really easy. Okay, I'll just be, moderate over here. But sometimes you really love to do something. And then I apply this to fighters all the time. I said, man, it's great that you love to fight. It's fantastic that you love to fight. That's why I joined the SCA. I fought for 30 years. It's a great time. What else do you do? Well, I'm a fighter. That's what I like to do. That's great. What else do you do? This is where the balance comes in. You provide anything to the kingdom? What, you know, what good are you to other people? And a lot of times we have discussions and people say, well, he does a lot for the kingdom. He fights in every war. And my argument is always fighters fight in wars because it's fun. It's not doing a favor for the kingdom. You go to war and you marshal, that's a favor for the kingdom. But in all things, temperance is very important. I need to apply that to pasta. I'm not really good at that. But you never want to get too excessive in one thing or the other. And that's because that's really where debates, I think, come about. And you can see mundanely, we have a lot of debates coming about because there's excess on one side or the other. There's not a lot of temperance. There's not a lot of balance going on in the world. So the more that we can do that, and more that we can follow that and be examples of that, I think that's very important. Now, one thing I think is really very interesting about Lull. Lull talks about strength as a virtue, but he never talks about it as a physical strength. That's discussed later. To Lull, strength was inner strength. And the way he breaks it down in his book, or in the book I'm looking at here, is Raymond Lull's Book of Knighthood and Chivalry and the Anonymous Order of Chivalry. He breaks down strength into different categories of fighting the vices. So when he says strength, you you fight lechery with the strength of chastity. So in period, chastity wasn't just, going without. Chastity meant faithfulness, really. So if you were married, chastity meant you were faithful to your spouse. It didn't mean, yeah, you were just cold. No. Use strength to fight greed. Everybody wants things. It's just human to want things. If you want things too much, you have to use your inner strength to fight that. We've all met gamblers. They got to use strength to fight that they want more and more and more. There's so many people in the world. They just want more and more and more. Again, this is where we see some of the vices in the world. People want more than they have, more than they need. So you use strength to fight that. Sloth, it's another one of my vices. Inner strength is get you going through that. Activity is what makes a knight strong. Inactivity is what basically brings you down. He then combines strength and humility. So humility he didn't really put as a separate uh, virtue on its own, but if you combine strength and humility together, that's how you fight pride. Pride itself is a vice. We all know people that are over proud, braggarts, just full of themselves. But pride, if it's hubris, is not a good thing. Being proud of yourself, being proud of what you do, that's a different kind of thought. And that's discussed in different ways in his books, but he's talking about hubris really when he talks about using strength and humility to fight that. Envy, we all see that in life. We all have it. We've all dealt with it. In the SCA chivalry world, a lot of that comes down to, and I was a subject of it myself. You see someone get knighted, and you're like, well, wait a second, what about me? I thought I was doing really well. It doesn't help you. It doesn't make you better. All it does is it holds you down, and it makes you bitter. So using that inner strength to fight that envy, it's very important and strong. And then wrath, that's anger. We've all seen anger. We've all seen anger on the field, which is a very, very bad thing. No one should ever fight angry. No one should ever fight with a vendetta. And that I think it's very, very interesting that Lull uses courage in this way. He's not talking about courage about running into battle, 1 on 10 and taking on the forces. He's talking about courage against yourself, courage against your ire. You want to hold down that temper, and you want to apply your common sense. You have the knowledge of good and evil through prudence, and you want to apply that goodness instead of just reaching out and attacking with that anger.
Let me roll back up to the top because we have the seven deadly sins, which are the ones that you've already touched upon. We also have gluttony and greed to add to your list.
So gluttony is interesting. This is something I learned recently. Gluttony wasn't written about someone that overeats. We always think of gluttony being, they just overeat. Really, it was defined in period and earlier actually than period as someone who's basically a hoarder of wealth. That's someone who they considered a glutton, which I find that very interesting looking in, when you terms of what's going on in the world. So looking at those seven deadly sins, it's very easy to see how those different things, can really bring down someone who's considering working themselves towards knighthood. Now, Guillermo has listed these other virtues. A lot of these, like I said, everybody's got their own list going back, hundreds and hundreds of years. Everybody's got what they consider their list. So some of the ones we didn't cover earlier, loyalty to me falls under faith. Fidelity. fidelity and and loyalty, faith, all the same kind of things. So if you have faith in your knight as a squire, you believe in them, you'll follow them, you'll trust them, you'll do what they say. Again, faith and loyalty, I think I do tie those together. Um, and
So
you got,
do you think that in our modern world, a person can choose maybe six or seven of these virtues to as goals for themselves to improve their character?
I think they can, but I think they got to be honest with themselves. You got to make sure you're not choosing ones that you're strong at.
Right.
It'd be really easy for me to leave gluttony and sloth off my list. But you should if someone does want to improve themselves, the virtues are a perfect place to go look and say, okay, well, how can I get myself better? You look at that and go, you know what? Compassion. That's probably something I need to work on, and that to me that feeds right into mercy. What's up?
So that brutal honesty about yourself, yeah, a part of me thinks that maybe you may not want to make this less public.
Well, yeah, you don't have to make yourself. I mean, the virtues are a very personal thing. I
Yeah.
discuss them in a historical sense, because I love sharing the history of chivalry, the history of the knights, the history of the valor of the virtues. But yeah, if you're working on yourself, there's really no reason to spread that out, unless you want someone to hold you to it. Frankly,
Mhm.
like prowess, you got prowess as a virtue. Lull mentions making sure that you follow athletics and sports to keep yourself fit. He didn't put it as a virtue specifically, but really it does fall under that. So prowess is something that if you're out there fighting, everybody's watching you. So you really are putting yourself out there to test your prowess publicly. Um,
Is there any of these virtues that are listed? Are there any virtues here that anybody does not really understand that you would like us to expound upon?
Great question.
Some of them are SCA specific.
Franchise.
That's a great question. So franchise, I love franchise. So franchise to me, again, everyone defines their virtues differently, but to me, franchise is the ability to present yourself in the manner of your station. For example, I'm a knight, I'm a baron, I'm the defender of the Rose Trimaris. There are certain things about me that when you see me, you should say, "Oh, yonder is a knight."
It's your personal brand.
See, I like that. I like
Okay.
them.
Okay.
But
That's
it's
what I
not
was trying to
just that.
understand.
I also include your composure. So when people talk about courtesy, I don't think of courtesy as a separate virtue. I think courtesy falls under franchise because, again, it's your brand. When you market yourself with your brand, you get out there, and when you speak to people and how you treat people, if I see, someone going over and greeting people, newcomers, and helping them and carrying things and lending them things, I said, wow, they have franchise. They're using virtues, they're using largesse to increase their franchise. They're using compassion, they're using mercy. And to me, that you're going to see that the virtues all feed into each other, which is fantastic.
It's bridge building. I like that. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you want to see these things feeding into each other. I really like that a lot.
So
Um,
it's not just looking like wearing the garb and having the armor. It's also how you carry yourself.
Understood.
right?
Can,
Yeah, you're
if I can, I'm going to read something from Lull that kind of covers it holistically. This is for every knight is obligated by all means to honor his person. First, to be well dressed in his person, then to have a well mounted horse, and then well armed and harnessed, which is armor, in their habiliment, and also deserves to be served by noble persons, that is to say, virtuous individuals, as all nobleness presupposes virtue. Yet, much more, without comparison, He is obligated to honor himself as nobility of courage, for through the nobility of courage he bears that high and noble order of knighthood, which is also defiled and dishonored when a knight forsakes his virtue of courage and indulges in false thoughts of treason, robbery, rape, murder, and theft, and extinguishes all the said virtues of nobility, such as justice, temperance, strength, and prudence, along with faith, good hope, charity, generosity, loyalty, among others previously mentioned, belonging to the most noble order.
Yeah, that's great. That's great stuff. So, as a nod to my fellow knights, when bringing into SCA terms, they say, well, first we look at their fighting, and I agree with that. We're going to look at a fighter's prowess. We're going to read that. We're going to look into that, and then once they get to a level of prowess where they're basically, not to be too blunt about it, basically they're worth considering talking about, then we make sure everything else is included. So something that Lull talks about, knights must undertake such sports as to make themselves strong in prowess, yet not forget their duties. Knights ought to take coursers to joust and to go to tourneys, hold an open table, to hunt hares, bears, and other wild beasts. For in doing these things, the knight exercises themselves to arms and thus maintain the order of knighthood. It is wickedness to love the customs to which a knight practices, but to despise the order to which he belongs. All of these things afore pertain to a knight as touching his body, and likewise justice, wisdom, charity, loyal, all the other. So Lull's basically saying stay fit. It doesn't necessarily mean just tourneying. Go hunting, go riding, do what you need to do to maintain the ability to stay a knight.
I have a few questions. I'm sorry,
Excellent.
I've had to juggle between our visuals, so I just figured out how to see the chat. So I'm having some difficulty with my computer at the moment.
I can see the
At,
questions. That's fine.
at the bottom, no, I got that, but
Okay.
just to answer the first question, where can I find the book, the red book you're referencing? That's the Brian Price book. I got my copy just on Amazon. If anybody wants a copy of this presentation, I have a bibliography I can at the end of this, which I could share with anybody. If you message me, I'll send it to you after we're finished. I don't know if I can upload it in the chat files. Oh, I can. Okay,
There you go.
before I'm done, I'll upload this presentation in the chat, and you'll have the bibliography so you can search for any of the books that we're referencing.
Someone also dropped an Etsy link for purchase.
Great.
Nice.
An FYI,
Nice.
underneath the yeah.
Edward noted that it's not on Amazon anymore. They're not easy to find. Been out of print for a while. Um, I'll contact Brian to see if he has any extra copies I can buy from him. I bought them. Like I said, I bought quite a few and I've handed them out at vigils and things. So I'll see if he's got more. The really hard one to find is this version of the Lull book. But Guillermo found another translation of Lull that's actually like $6 on Amazon. So it's great. I just ordered 4 of them yesterday.
I got a great question here. Thank you, Carberry. Would subtlety be the idea of using the other virtues in a way that doesn't demand recognition or attention? That's an awesome
It's
question.
it's funny that my squire would answer that, being squire to a guy who always demands recognition and attention. I'm not gonna lie, I do like attention, but that is a great way to view it. I've never actually seen subtlety listed with the virtues, but it is a great ideal to uphold. You don't want to be overbearing. You don't want to be. We all know those people that get in your face with what they do. Look what I've done. That the Disney
It
get.
kind of parallels humility and temperance and courtesy.
Yep,
You
they all
know?
kind of tie together. Exactly. Absolutely. Great question. All right.
So you had a few things here,
I did.
characteristics that Lulz speaks of.
Yeah, so there's things that he didn't really designate specifically as virtues, but he did mention that these are things that a knight must possess, to be a knight. respect a knight must, and he didn't say can and should, he said must. The knight must respect the common good, since for the greater good chivalry was established. When we say the greater good, there can be all kinds of definitions of that. It can be very broad, it can be very specific. It can be, maintaining peace in your lands. It could be encouraging growth. It could be raising children. It could be a lot of different things, greater good. So that's something where you got the prudence to know the difference between good and evil, and the knight must respect the common good. And in period, that was very important because again, they were discouraged from doing a lot. If what's funny is in the lull book, there's probably 4 or 5 different places where they say a knight must not be a robber. You must not steal. So apparently that was an issue back then because they were the strongest people then, and they were probably very, very proud of themselves. So the virtues that he laid down many, many times, he says, you're the one stopping these things. You're not the one doing these things. Must be courteous. We covered that. To me, again, that falls under franchise. Must speak well. We've had a lot of peers in the SCA that are really great at what they do, but maybe they don't speak so well. And that what's difficult about that is maybe they don't teach so well. And teaching to me is a very important part of being a peer. As a knight, you should be able to go out and assist people with learning. I haven't fought in quite a few years, but I definitely go to practice as often as I can just to help out some of the newer fighters, maybe some of the older fighters. I can teach them a little more things, straighten out some of their fundamentals, stuff like that.
Wouldn't that be largesse?
Well, I wouldn't think it's largesse because largesse to me is giving more of yourself. To me, training is something required. It's not even like going over and above. To me, largesse is going over and above. Largesse to me would be going to practice and handing out pieces of armor, handing out rattan, and say, I bought a bundle of rattan. Here, sticks for everybody. To me, that's largesse. Training, that's your duty. That's your job. Um, I just read the passage about undertaking such sports as to make themselves strong. Um, possess such riches as to support his office. Dob, that's where we talk about the franchise. Law comes straight out and says, you need to be wealthy enough to be a knight. There's many stories in history going back, to the year 1100 about poor hedge knights trying to get through the world because they end up working for barons or dukes or things like that because they're so poor. All they have is their armor on them. And Lull is like, no, you have to be your own man. You have to be able to support your office.
I think of remember the movie A Knight's Tale
Hmm.
and how the movie starts, he they didn't have enough gold to put things together and they didn't have the equipment and they had to build everything as they went and eventually once he was able to comport himself with the equipment and he comported himself with his character, he eventually got knighted, but he had to get to that place. It was a journey.
Right, right. Dominic made a point here. He says largesse is something you can physically give, and that's true, but it's not just that. Um, when Perfect example, when Sir Kalen drove all the way down from Lakeland to Marcaster practice because she wanted to give some time to train some of the people down there and work out with them. To me, I consider that largesse. She, I live in the area, so I go there and it's my job to train. She has a practice that she goes to, but she felt the need to come all the way down here to do that. We've had other people do that. So giving of your time, when you go help somebody move, frankly, that's largesse. There's a lot of things that I would consider largesse, but definitely giving, you know, physically things certainly falls under that.
So when you're talking about the other things we do, the balance that we have, the service that we do outside of fighting, i.e. marshaling or helping out at an event, the giving back. Would you say that falls into the largesse?
It can, it can. Um, it's just important to understand which part is duty and which part is extra.
Hmm.
Um, so being in the SCA, a lot of things fall as a peer. A lot of things fall under basically what I consider your job. Um, because a peer should be able to start a group from scratch. I think a peer should be participating in running events. I think a peer should be participating in running tournaments. They should, there's, attending outside, judging, entering, all these things to me, I wouldn't consider those as extra. And it's really not, giving anybody else. It's participating. Whereas largesse, like I said, if I had a bolt of linen that I bought really cheap and I brought it to an art site and I said everybody can take 5 yards, that's largesse. That's something that's going to be really helpful to them. And in some cases, it can be considered mercy. If you have extra food and some family is really hurting, um, our Order of Chivalry has done this in the past. We try not to talk it up, but we have raised money for families in the past and just handed them money. That's largesse, but that's also mercy, because these are people that were close to being homeless, and they've become very strong members of our community since then, which is fantastic. So, like we talked about before, all these things are going to tie in together, and it's very useful. And then he says chivalry is more in accord with courage than in strength of the body. I don't want to say anybody can become a quality fighter by working and training really hard, but most people can. If you dedicated yourself and your time and you practice and practice and practice, but that doesn't make you a knight. It's the courage to follow the virtues, and it takes courage to follow all the virtues. Sometimes they're hard to follow. Sometimes they make you do things that you didn't really want to do. Sometimes you don't want to step up, but you know it's the right thing to do. It's very important.
Courage is a word that I think is a bit underrated. Um, I mean, we think of the saying is courage without fear, and which it's not. It's despite fear.
Oh yeah, courage is with fear. If you have no fear, you're not showing courage, frankly.
Right. And so we usually think of courage in in scenes of battle or war. But I think there's a much more subtler approach to courage that it applies to our interactions with others. And do we have the courage to say what needs to be said?
Right.
And do we have the courtesy to say it in the right way?
And courage can be very simple. Like we being in a club that we're in, we all know a lot of introverts that they will go to an event and go forward and talk to people and share themselves. That takes courage. I'm not that guy. Sometimes it takes me courage to shut up. Um, but you're right. Courage. It's funny to me. Courage is both overused and under supported.
Mhm.
There are certain little small things that people do that take a lot of courage out of them, whereas other people do these big, flashy things, and they're like, "Oh, look at the courage he's showing." Well, he's not showing courage because he doesn't have fear of that. When there was a time in a tournament when I fought and I was exhausted, and the king at the time saw I was exhausted, but I kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And he came out and he said, "You show great courage in that." I said, "Your Majesty, I knew I wasn't going to get killed. This is SCA fighting. That wasn't courage." I said, courage would be someone coming out here in their first fight and saying, you know, "I'm going to try fighting today. And I've never been hit with a club in my life, but I'm going to try it." That's the courage.
I mean, another example would be if you see a friend or if you see somebody that may be slipping or going down a dark path, and you if you speak up, you could be putting your friendship on the line,
Yeah,
but and a lot of people will just go along where they wouldn't say anything. The line from World War II, evil is when good men say nothing.
right,
But if you have the courage to step up for their friend and say what must be said as a true friend should, but not everybody has that level. And
right. That does take a lot of courage. And it's basically you're showing an act of mercy by
Mhm.
trying to help them correct their life. Sometimes people get in a very dark place, and it's easy just to kind of avoid them. And that's when they need you the most. We've had that situation in the SCA where sometimes you have trouble with the king, and you're like, look, I don't want to be a knight right now. I don't want to be around this guy. That's actually when the kingdom needs knights the most, is when, you know, there's trouble on the top. So Lull dedicates several of these characteristics to ensuring that knights don't steal. Like I mentioned that earlier, he does mention quite a few times about stealing. So there's other things that he puts in the book that I try to apply to my time as a fighter. Probably the last, I would say, 10 years of my fighting career. They discuss something called fighting à outrance versus plaisance. And this is something Charnay actually got into because Charnay, again, was more into the actual mechanics of the fighting. So fighting à outrance basically means fighting in the style of war. So if you're fighting the style of war, that means you are out there to def kill the person, defeat the person, where fighting à plaisance is fighting for pleasure. To me, that's all of the fighting in the SCA. And some people say, well, war is war. I said, no. In the SCA, war is a giant tournament. And if you look at some of Charnay's books, and Rene Danjou has got some really great manuscripts where you see a list field and there's 50, 60 guys in there fighting at one time. It's still not war. That's a tournament. That's what we do. That's where our melees. Penzik is not a war. And I got into a debate with a knight one time. He said, "No, it's war, and I'm fighting, and I'm trying to kill you." I said, "Okay, so if I beat you, I take your armor, right?" He said, "What?" I said, "I take your armor because I beat you. I take everything you own. I'll go back to your camp and loot it." He's like, "What do you?" No. I said, "Well, then we're not fighting outrance, are we? Because that's what they did in period. Or I knock you out and I sell you back to your family." He's like, "Well, that'd be fun to have, bounties and stuff like that." I said, "Oh no, it's not a bounty. Your wife's going to give me $1,000, or you don't get to, or I'm going to tie you up for the rest of the event." Well, I said, "Yeah, exactly. That's fighting à outrance.
It,
We
I,
don't do that."
I've been reading and preparing for a future episode of Trimaris Talks by reviewing The Art of War. And if you review The Art of War, you're actually talking about war, you see how a lot of that doesn't really apply to the SCA because we are gentle, we're frenemies, we're not running away from the battle. We're dying on the field because we know we're not dying. You don't have the fear or the fury or the blood and the guts that you see in war. And so there's a whole psychology that would happen on a real battlefield that we just don't have in the SCA.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a lot of the period writings about chivalry and knighthood and virtues really don't apply because we aren't putting our life on the line for the
Mhm.
things. But there are a lot that do. And Brockus, he wrote that the knightly virtues are not exclusive to knighthood, really. They're more or less just being a good human. Am I right? You're absolutely right, Brockus. I think you joined a little later, but every one of these things applies in your everyday life. My good knight, Bendon, and I, we both share the same viewpoint that this is our religion. Um, we don't subscribe to any organize one, but the virtues keep us in line, and we try to follow them as much as we can. Uh,
Can I share how do people see the virtues in action? There's another quote from Brian Price I'd like to read from that illustrates how it's witnessed. A combatant is judged by his conduct. His prowess can be seen by his physical ability to move the sword around himself and to provide defense, but his character is judged in the limelight of the tournament field, under the microscope into which peer the populace, the marshals, the crown, the lady or consorts, and the opponent. All form opinions based on our actions, on our gestures, on our sincerity. In this way, we strive to communicate our chivalric and knightly intent to everyone around the tournament, to display our chivalry by example.
it's what we got to do. Dog put a question in here. In a case where speaking out is ignored, what would be the virtuous avenue to take? Are there multiple paths? Well, that's a great question and a good point. There's probably multiple paths to pretty much any situation. In a case where speaking out is ignored, you need to use the virtue of courage to go to people who can make a difference. If no one's going to listen to me, I'm going to go to somebody that they will listen to. Um, Say it's a manner of fighting, and I say, I don't think that's legal. I don't think that's safe. And they say, you haven't fought in 5 years, 10 years, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. I will take that argument to the Earl Marshal and say, Earl Marshal, here's my position. I want to state it this way, and I think this is and they might look at that. Okay, so if they agree with you, then they can take it to someone that will make a difference. In a lot of cases, they might just say, no, that's just the way it is, and we're going to go with that. If it's really important to you, you keep pursuing it go to different places, different people, different areas to cover that. So there are multiple ways to handle that. Um, there have been things in the past where I've talked myself blue in the face and people didn't listen, so I published something. Um, there's when you want to write things for some reason, people look at it and they go, oh, okay, now I know what he's talking about. So that's a great question. And yes, there's definitely multiple ways to do that. And if you do feel like your voice isn't being heard, go to somebody that think will first of all, find someone that you believe will hear you. And then maybe together you can go to somebody that will take action on that issue.
So one word that I was impressed, a lot of intent that Price put into it was the word sincerity.
Mm.
That on the list field you can measure a person's sincerity and how do they do their salutes, to the crown, to their opponent, to their lady, or their consort. How do they offer courtesy towards their opponent? How do they comport themselves in battle? You can see a sincerity by their actions and their courtesy through their actions.
Sincerity is very important. And when I was a younger knight, my eyes weren't as wide open as they are now, but there would be candidates that we had troubled candidates. We're like, okay, there's a problem with this fighter. He's doing this, and this, and we just don't like it. And it's brought to their attention. And they would work on those things, but they would work on those things literally just to be seen doing them. So we would see somebody, they do really great for 6 months, and then the order would say, hey, we gotta talk about this guy, blah, blah. And then you find out, if they get in or not, they just go back to what they were before. And that's that is someone that's absolutely showing that they don't believe in the virtues, that they're not following them, that they aren't sincere. Sincerity is extremely important because that means you are following the virtues with intent, not with a goal in mind, not with gain in mind. Um, this is something that Ben and I discuss is that there are definitely fighters out there that'll come to us and say, "Oh yeah, tell us all about chivalry and stuff like that," and they feel like it that you want them they want to be seen asking about these things. They want to be seen discussing these things, but it really doesn't mean anything to them. Whereas at this point, I could talk to somebody and discuss these things and know, okay, that really means a lot to them. That's something that's going to be important to them.
Can you talk a little bit about accepting blows and how that is part of chivalry?
Sure, we could talk about the application in the SCA. So, as most people know, in the SCA, the way fighting works, it's an honor system. We train everybody how hard a blow is that should be taken as a defeat. I hate to say killing blow, taken as a defeat. When we know for a fact that they know what a good blow is, and they go above and beyond that, they won't take it. Um, they're being dishonest, and they're going against the virtues. They're basically selling out their honor for victory. And I want to mention the word honor. It's very interesting to me. Whenever I hold a chivalry roundtable, one of the first questions I ask is, "What's the most important virtue?" And I would say 80% of the people there say, "Well, honor. Honor is the most important virtue." To me, honor is not a virtue. Honor is what you get by following the virtues. So if I am a virtuous knight, I gain honor. If I am an honorable knight who has great prowess, I get valor. If you get valor by having prowess, by having courage, but also making sure that you are an honorable knight. So again, honor doesn't to me seem to be a virtue.
Hola
It's basically to me it's the
there.
result of following the virtues.
Hola there.
What's that?
No.
Hanko, you're not on mute there, Hanko.
Oh, you can. Sorry.
Would you say honor is related to renown?
I would. That's a great point. So renown, so honor you get by being virtuous, and people notice that they can trust you, that you are, somebody they can have faith in.
Nope.
Renown is when they know who you are. When you travel, when let's say as a knight, I went to Great Western War. I've never been out there before, and I get there and I put on my tabard and my shield, and they go, "Oh, that's Sir Severin. That's renown," and that is earned through the virtues, but prowess and valor definitely feed into that very strongly. Um, but also, you gain renown through your deeds, whether they're fighting or not. So, if you're somebody who goes to events and you always marshal, or you always, you're always working in the kitchen, you're always at gate, you're always helping out, you're always doing something. When you get to the site, they're going to say, "Hey, look at Jack over there. Great to see him. I'm so glad he's here. I know he's going to be helpful. I know he's going to be useful." Or you show up and they say, "I have a problem. I need some help. I know I can trust Jim over there. I know I can ask him for help." That's renown as well. That's being
Gravitas.
gravitas. Gravitas is part of that. So gravitas means you have depth to your word and your actions. You're not just flighty. You're not just it's not just a joke to you. Gravitas means this is serious to you. Those are all great terms.
But
That's
doesn't it also mean that people know that about you?
not necessarily. Um, you can display gravitas and they may not know who you are.
Okay.
I've had that happen to me many times where I'll go out in the field and I'll meet somebody and I'm like, wow, okay, his words and his deeds, that's impressive. It's like an aura almost. Gravitas to me is kind of like an aura where what they do, I pay attention. It's like you guys probably remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials, but there was a brokerage that said, "When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen." That to me is gravitas. People stop to listen to what you have to say, and that's gravitas, and that's a great thing to have.
So we have a question. Is it self-improvement or goal-oriented change?
Well, I mean, it's those are kind of intertwined. To me, the virtues you're never going to be perfect at them, of course. So, Hanko, you joined a little later. We talked about picking out some of the virtues and saying, okay, these are things I want to work on in my life, um, and then you work towards them. So it's self-improvement. When you say goal-oriented change, I kind of see that the same way, where you're like, I I I need to be. Let's look at one of these here. Temperance. I need to work on my temperance. I tend to go way too high here and way too low here. So that's somebody would say, okay, I need to work on that and make things. Sir Domenico just mentioned the change has to stick. Then it's improvement. That's a great way to describe that. Yeah, you can change all you want. If you go right back to it, it's not really an improvement. So that's a great point. Like my diets. Some of the other terms that he put down here. Oh, David wrote, desire of the cookie is what I see as goal-oriented change. Some knights will tell you it's bad to see knighthood as a goal, that you're supposed to just fight for the love of fighting. I don't think it's bad to want to be a knight. To me, that means you want to follow the path of virtue. Um, it's when you go overboard. It's when you start thinking of yourself, I deserve this. Again, you look back at the virtues we discussed. You want to you want to set that goal as a way to improve yourself. Someone's not muted there. Hey, Ronan, you're not
I got
muted there. Thank you. So yeah, setting a goal is not a bad thing. Setting a goal above all else is. So someone that says, I'm going to be a knight or else. And that's all they do is they work on fighting and they do this and that. And then they look around and they've helped nobody else. They've done nothing for the kingdom. They've offered up nothing. That's that's where it can be the wrong way to go. But neither one is bad. Let's see here.
Honor,
Dominic wrote,
point of
Dominic,
honor.
Dominic wrote, want to be a knight is good, but a knighting should be an outward acknowledgement of the inward. That's a great description. So when you get to the point where you've been a knight, long enough that you're in the order and you're looking at things, that's exactly right. We're not making knights, we're recognizing them. So I look at Dominic, I look at Thomas that we just made recently, the two recent knights, and we're making Amicus. We're not turning them into knights. All we're doing is saying they've behaved knightly for a long time. So what we're doing is we're just giving them the accoutrements and letting them join our circle. So that's really how that goes about. I'm sorry, Guillermo, you were saying point of honor. Point of honor, I guess if you're talking about like a act of courtesy or thing like that, is that what you mean?
Well, I think Price was pointing out that as a in tournament fighting, if somebody's armed, to as a point of honor and courtesy, you can do the chivalrous thing as an option to drop your shield so that you're on an even playing field.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I this is something I actually will take credit for. For years, people called that an act of chivalry. And I would tell them it's not an act of chivalry because chivalry is what a knight does. And a knight wouldn't give up an advantage that he just gained. It's an act of courtesy. So I've kind of steered people to that terminology over the years. So when someone gives up an arm or a leg, something like that, Brian calls it a point of honor. I guess that's something they say out in the West Kingdom. It's a great term. But I've always used act of courtesy because again, act of chivalry would never do that for you in real life. And middle. Dobbs said would not be an act of mercy. It would be. Uh, you're not pressing your advantage. If you're giving up your advantage, that is an act of mercy. Um, we also talked about that mercy falling into charity. So if I'm fighting a new fighter and I take their legs, it just wouldn't be gracious to just beat them into the ground. So yeah, fighting from my knees against that new fighter. Now, if you're fighting a duke and you take his arm, don't give that up. That's you just keep on top of them.
Question is, would it not also be an act of mercy?
Yeah, I just answered that for him.
Yeah.
Ken just said it's also an act of courtesy to ask your opponent. Yeah, um, that's a great point. Years and years and years ago, when Duke Gregory was just Greg, he was starting out fighting, and I fought him in a tournament, and I took his legs, and I said, "I bet you want me to go to my knees." He said, "No, I don't." I took my legs and I went down and I hit him, and oh, was he mad? Because he felt like I was showing him up. So uh, Kelvin's got a fantastic point there in that everything is situational. You want to check with your opponent. You want to say, "Would you mind if I join you on the ground?" You hear that on the field. That's really great when people ask that. Would you mind if I give up my arm? Because again, you don't want to treat them like if you're fighting someone on your level. If you're a squire fighting another squire, you don't want to treat them like you're their superior. So it's like, well, I'll just give up my arm. Yeah, that goes from being a virtue to almost just showing them up, and that's not good.
That goes back to sincerity.
Right. It also goes back to knowing prudence, knowing of good and evil, where you say, "What? I was really good. I gave up my arm for him." It's like, yeah, because you were showing up. Just cut it out. So,
Crawford, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Kellen,
I he Severin addressed it.
yeah,
Just making a point
he put the comment in there about being courtesy to
Yeah.
ask, which is a great point.
because as Severin mentioned, I have fought others in the past, and it is my personal honor to try and fight my opponent in the most even way possible. That is me. That is not everyone. And I have insulted people by I happened to take their leg and join them, and it took me a while to figure out, oh, why they got all mad. Why are you getting mad? And oh, okay. because they feel that you're insulting. Some people feel that you're insulting them or showing out.
Right. Right. All right. Let's see what other terms you got here. Um, you've got some terms in here. Regalia. Regalia to me is the accoutrement worn by basically anybody in the SCA, anywhere from a king wearing a crown down to a lord wearing a circlet. The regalia of a knight is an unadorned gold chain, a white belt. It may also include spurs, depends on what kingdom you're in, frankly.
At the last Kingdom event, one of our uh, brothers, he was elevated to peerage, I think one of the first for archery, and he had his vigil. And a lot of people were asking what would be the regalia for being a peer of archery. I think very recently he had his elevation, and they gave him the vambraces, beautiful
Mhm.
vambraces, for his regalia.
Yeah, those are beautiful. The embraces and the medallion.
Hmm.
And as a side note, I'm really glad they went with the term Order of the Mark. They had some really wacky terms that they were batting around and just didn't make any sense.
There's a lot
Uh,
of talk about the regalia of knighthood, some things that we use in the SCA and some things we don't use in the SCA. Um, but you know, the spurs and the symbolism. And so when you read the books, you find that each item of the regalia has a meaning and a depth of wisdom to it.
One thing I found very interesting when I sat down with now Sir Thomas, when he came to my house and we went over the virtues and all the different things for his ceremony. One of the things Lull says to do once you are knighted, once the knighting is completed, is to go out into the town and speak to your people. And Tom's not a shy guy; he's just not a loud guy. And one of the things I told him, I said, I fully support you as a knight and as a peer. I just don't think enough people know you. And he took my advice and he took Lull's advice and he said, "You're right. Once I'm knighted, I need to go out and I need to talk to everybody, not just my community." So I was glad he took that to heart, and I think that's very important. We have a lot of peers in the SCA. They're like, "Well, I do what I do." Well, that's great, but you need to do what you do with members of the SCA. Um, there's a lot of things that pelicans do. It's really easy to do in the darkness where people don't see it. And if you do it out publicly, they're like, oh, they're just showing off. Like to me, no, that's demonstrating to the public what they can do to serve the kingdom. And that's you say you wrote chivalry by example. Chivalry by example, to me, that covers anybody, no matter what you do, whatever service you provide. Make sure it's a visible service so that other people can provide that as well. Because whatever you do, someone also wants to do that.
I'm very honored that we have several members of the Chivalry joining us tonight, and several people that have been in the SCA for decades. And if any of you wish to share your experience of how you've applied the virtues in your life, feel free. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm going to call on my knight. Brendan, what do you say?
I just wanted to sit here and watch.
You know that's not going to happen.
No, no. You know, you talked a little bit about courtesy earlier, and courtesy, part of that, especially in a chivalric sense and a military sense, is when you come out onto the field, your kit should be in sharp form. Should be clean, should be strapped, should be set, shouldn't be held together by duct tape. That's courtesy to your opponent. Giving your opponent your best fight is courtesy. More so than taking a knee, more so than picking up his sword if he drops it. For myself, if I lose a weapon in a tournament, if it's dangling off my arm through the lanyard, I'll take a couple of steps back, call a hold. I will ask, as a sign of courtesy, I will ask my opponent if he would like me or allow me to rearm. If he says no, I will fully accept the fact that I'm now helpless and he has won that tournament.
Mhm. That's great.
You know?
Talking about, the duct tape and things like that, it's a great courtesy to not make your opponent wait for you to fix your armor. That
Exactly.
when you see that on the field and someone has to say, hold on, my leg's falling off. I'll hang on my elbow. That's a discourtesy because now their time is wasted. Or
Exactly.
getting to the field on time. When they call your name, don't make people stand out in the sun. Um, it's really showy to show a point of honor. It's really showy to do an act of courtesy, like you said, to go to your knees for that. Those aren't nearly as helpful to your opponent as not making them stand in the sun or not making them wait while you fix your armor. Those are great points, Ben, and thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is very important, and I know I think you covered it, is humility is probably, you can solve more problems and combat more sin with humility than probably any other virtue. One of the things I will write in every peer's book, without fail, and I mean it, and every time I do it, it's not just by rote, is that above all, humility.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
I think a lot of people don't really understand the meaning of humility, because people will show what they think is humility, but it's like a show. It's not a sincere understanding of where you are and who you are and how you can learn by keeping your cup half empty, by accepting the fact that you're not, totally knowledgeable about everything.
Right. Right. You're not going to know everything. You will have to make that on occasion. You're going to have to, you know what? I don't know enough. Let me go ask Severin. Let me go ask Owen. Let me go ask Ronan. Let me go ask, Odo, whatever. If I don't know something, I will gladly do it. But again, that humility of, being able to say I was wrong is a very important aspect of humility. I missed the shot. I apologize. The round is yours. In a militaristic sense, or in a combatant sense. I came to the field. The strap on my shield broke. The day is yours. I apologize. I'm wrong for being here now because I didn't come to the field. Those are all things of humility. What happens is we get into a fight with ego and vain pride. And between those three, ego, vanity, and pride, we create monsters in the SCA. and those three sins there are without any kind of temperance can destroy individuals. They can destroy groups. They can destroy kingdoms because somebody doesn't have the humility to step down and say, it's not all about me.
One situation where it wasn't received very, very, very well. I pointed out when you go to Gulf Wars or you go to Pennsic, we have those spear gods, those fighters, those knights, those dukes, that they'll get a spear and it's a melee and you're supposed to be fighting in a unit and they run out in front of everybody and they're just stabbing people back and forth and you're holding that shield wall, trying to maintain the flag or whatever you're doing, and they come back and they're like, oh, I killed 34 guys. I said, you left us out here. You left us hanging out without air support. We got swept by this unit. I know, but I killed 33 guys. I said, you have no humility whatsoever. Well, no, I'm helping the kingdom. I said, you left your unit. You have no humility whatsoever. All you're doing is you're just making numbers. And it's interesting, that particular thing, it definitely stings a lot of people because it's something that a lot of very experienced, very quality fighters love to do because it's fun. Sure, it's fun. It's always great fun to run out there and just basically rifle people all over the field. It's harder to hang back with your unit, stand behind the shield wall, and help your unit stay, survive.
Yep. Commanders of the army have to understand. When I commanded the army and back in the day, blah blah blah. Both my squires are laughing right now, but the idea of the commander of the army is to hand the crown the victory and take the loss on their own. So the crown can come in and he'll say, I need you to come up with a battle plan. I need you to make sure our troops are in place, command, all that. That's all wonderful. A couple of guys can ruin all that because SCA combat is squirrels in a box once that gun goes off. Where the king can all of a sudden change his mind and decide he needs to, I'm going to run through the line now regardless of whatever plans or where we're at on there. If it all goes to shit, then that is on the commander of the army. He hands the victory to the crown, regardless of everything he did up to that point. It's the crown's victory.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
humility. That's humility.
Sir Domenico wrote, when we get what we deserve, that's justice. When we positively what we don't deserve, that's mercy. Oh, okay. That's a great way to look at that. When you get what you deserve, I hate the word deserve. I like earned. When you get what you've earned, that's justice. Never say the word deserved around my wife. She hates that word. When we get something positive that we didn't earn, that's mercy. I like that a lot. That's great, Dominic. And Hanko, hubris can kill morale. Boy,
Yes.
that was really my point there with the spear thing. I hung back there with the shield wall and watched the Dukes run off, and I could hear the guys grumbling. Squires, unbelts, new fighters are like, well, we're just supposed to stand there and watch them go off and kill people? Like, I'm sorry. All I could say was I'm sorry. Because, yeah, even if they're successful, let's say they're very successful and no one ever gets to the shield wall. Well, you didn't get to fight because these guys were out there stealing your glory. So that's a great point.
So for me, the virtues might change over a person's path. The virtues that are maybe if they're the goal that we're working on to improve our character, just like we might practice a flat snap or our shots to improve our prowess. As we go, we might find that we conquer some of our vices, and we're able to move forward and continue to work on our character as we're on the path of improving ourselves 1% each day,
Right.
so that tomorrow we're a better person than we were yesterday.
Right.
And that's what for me the virtues have offered me is an opportunity not just to be a warrior, but a spiritual warrior for myself, so that I'm on the path to be a better person, not just in the SCA. I apply it to my life. I apply
Right.
it on the train. I apply it at my work. This isn't just a game. It's something that can really shape a person's identity.
It's true, and we talked earlier that the virtues apply no matter what you do, whether you're a fighter or not. Prowess. I know some laurels that talk about skill in an art as their prowess. So when they talk about it, a person's prowess, they're an excellent artist. They did this really wonderful painting. Their prowess is very strong. There's no reason you can't use those terms. There's no reason they can't use all the terms that we use for no matter what you do in life. We now have 3 martial orders, but laurels and pelicans, this applies to them just as much.
Does anybody else want to share or ask questions?
Hey, Squire, you got anything for me?
Sir Severin, I
No.
got a question for you.
Sure. All right, Kellen.
I'm sure I kind of know the answer, but I'd like to maybe you can repeat it to the group. What do you think is the most important virtue that you've talked about this evening?
You joined a little late, Kenny, but the one I talked about was mercy. I think mercy to me is the most important because if you could be the most virtuous knight in the world, encompassing all the other virtues, if you're merciless, just the term merciless tells you that is a terrible person. Somebody without mercy is means somebody who sees someone in need of aid and says, "I don't need to help them. I have things to do." Whether it's carrying a box, whether it's helping them, getting an overheated baby into a cabin, whether it's whatever it is, mercy is to me paramount. And I forget the other term we used for mercy was charity. To me, those kind of go together, charity and mercy. But thanks for bringing it back up because that's important. Brock has just asked, do we have any mods in here? I don't know if we do. Any order? I mean, order to the fence. And my squire thought he got out of a question because Kenny jumped in. Come on, Carabra, give me something.
So I included our presentation and I dropped it in the chat. I'm going to share screen again just so we can review some of the other books that I put in the bibliography.
Oh, good. Got him in there.
And this is a point of reference. Here we go. So you can look for some of these. Some of these are period books, and some of these are SCA modern references, and some of them are articles. Do you want to reference any of these or introduce any of these books?
Well, Castiglione, I love him because he's Italian Renaissance, Book of the Courtier. Um, that's a great book for understanding behaviors in a civilized group. That'd be great for somebody to read. Being in the SCA, because we're all nobles in theory, unless there are actually people that choose not to be nobles in the SCA, but that's rare. Um, but that's a great book for that. Of course, Charnay, the Book of Chivalry. As I discussed earlier, Charnay loves to discuss the actual nuts and bolts, the mechanics of tournaments and things like that. Here's the perfect example. And this is actually from Steve Mulberger's book, Joust and Tournaments, just a random question. Charnay asks, let me say, a banneret sends out from his entourage some knights to go out with him in the fields to joust with those who have set the emprise. And emprise is like a tournament, a combat. Those knights agree with him and sally forth on their own horses, which are with him. If there are 2 or 3 of them whose horses are dead and injured in the joust from blows or falls, will their banneret be obliged to compensate them? What do you say? So when I say that Charnay was kind of a rules lawyer, it's exactly what he was. He's like, okay, the knight banneret, and a knight banneret is basically a knight who has knights under him. A knight banneret sends out 6 or 7 knights to go fight in that tournament in a joust. 3 of them say, hey, my horse got killed. Are you going to pay for it? Dub, gotta get your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You had referenced this book before at Squire's Revolt. Is that the Book of the Order by Ramon Lull? Is the one with the black border? And you said that one is really hard to find, correct?
This one is hard to find, but
Okay.
there is a book that is a Raymond Lull book of, I think it's called the Book of Chivalry. Is that the one you have, Richard? The red one?
I'm sorry. I just
I
remember.
muted myself. Yeah, I have the book of the Order of Knighthood.
No, not Brian's book, the Lull book. You
Oh,
showed me it.
that is the low book, the book of the Order of Knighthood.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there's one. It's like $6 on Amazon.
Okay.
Whereas this one, like I said, I found a used copy for $350 on eBay. I was like, no, thank you.
Jeez.
Yeah, there you go.
This is what $6 looks like.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
That's great.
as long as it is okay, that's good.
Yeah, it's a translation from somebody else, but it's a translation of the same person.
Gotcha.
There are 2 things in here that I thought were really cool. One of them is at the end of the book, there's literally a letter that Aristotle wrote to Alexander the Great.
Nice.
You know, Alexander the Great has conquered the Persians, and he's debating whether or not to do mass slaughter or to have mercy. And Aristotle was his advisor for many, many years. But when he got to be too old to travel to be his advisor, he put together some writings so that Alexander the Great could refer to Aristotle's writings because he was too old to be there in person. And there's a really cool letter in here answering his question of what he should do with the Persians.
Nice.
And just the idea that we could read a book and hear Aristotle's words, you know, after not centuries but millennia, just blows my mind. There was another interesting kind of question about chivalry and how to handle an issue that came up in a tournament where you had a German knight who was visiting France, and he finds a French knight has his device on his shield. So you have 2 knights with the same device, and these 2 knights are at odds because the German's saying that he stole my device, and he wants to fight to the death for the right for his device. and he's asking the crown for the right to fight over this. And the crown turns to his advisors, and it's a lot of talk is about how a king must have good advisors that are calm and well thought out and literate to give him good guidance. And the answer to that question was hell no. These are two people from two different countries. He didn't do it out of maliciousness. There's no reason you can't have two knights with similar devices. But if it was a case where a knight was out and killing and pillaging and raping with your device, that's a different story. Because then he's maligning you with your device. In that case, it would be your duty to face that knight and bring him to justice so that you keep your name clear. So it was there are a lot of really interesting vignettes where you get to see in period what how the virtues played out in reality.
See, and I lived that at Penzig one year. Some guy came up to me on the field battle, and he had grapes on his shield. He's like, "Hey, we both got grapes." I said, "No, we don't," and I had to take him out. It was just a thing.
We had a question about the mods. I think Barakas was asking, does the rapier community have the equivalent and how the virtues apply to chivalry?
Frankly, I think every one of these things applies to rapier equally. Now, if the question is, do they have books focusing on that period of style swordsmanship? I imagine they do. I don't know how much they go into the virtue aspect of it. I know there's a lot of fecht books, which are basically fight training books. It's more the actual act of fighting, the actual training. But that's a great question for Ahmad. When we go to Res Centurius this weekend, I'm sure we can have some we can ask.
Do you want to talk about Stephen Moberg's book?
Sure, jousts and tournaments. See, here's where I get to show a little hubris. So years and years and years ago, Brian Price had a little pamphlet basically called the Chronique. It was the Chronicles of Chivalry, and people would send in articles and write different things. And it was very interesting. It was great to have. Um, and at one point, I got interested in Charnay, and like I said, he had the questions of joust, of war, and tournament. So I sat down and I got my dictionaries of Middle French, Old French, and I translated probably 5 or 6 of each of the questions. Um, but I didn't do the whole thing, and I didn't do a lot of the intro stuff that Charnay. Well, apparently Stephen Molberg, who is Duke Finvar in the Mid Realm, he's also Professor Stephen Molberger from Nipissing University. So he's a very smart guy. He sat down and he read what I wrote, and he got inspired, and that's actually where this came from. And the hubris I'm going to show is that he actually dedicated my name's right in here a little bit to me for inspiring him. So that the fact that I can inspire somebody to create such a beautiful work, it makes me feel really good. So what's in here, like I said, a lot of those are those questions, those lawyer questions. Now knights are jousting without any formal announcement, and one knight knocks another down and out of the saddle with a stroke of the lance. Will he who knocked the other down win the horse? What do you say? So basically, they're saying they're doing pickups over there. It's not the actual tournament, but he knocked him off his horse. Did he get to keep his horse? These are questions that we can't really answer, and that was actually the intent then as well, because every kingdom, frankly, every tournament may have had different rules. So this was Charnay's way of saying, hey, let's discuss this. Let's discuss how we do our rules. Let's discuss how we think of chivalry and how we think of fighting. But it's kind of fun to read those because it's his little book of rules. It's like his Hoyle books of rules for fighting. But the chapters are even explain part one, exploring chivalric sport, because Charnay was a very much about the fighting. He was a member of the company, the Star. Is that right, Ben and Star? Yeah, and that's actually where he perished. They were bringing the 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 flamberge, darn it, I forgot the word for the big long French banner. But he was actually carrying the banner running into battle, and that's when he was killed because he was representing the kingdom. He was representing the Order of the Star, and
the Oriflamme.
Oriflamme. Thank you. See, I knew he knows everything. The Oriflamme. So yeah, he was carrying the giant long banner into battle because he wanted to represent, he wanted to make sure his kingdom, his people, his king were represented, and he did it at the cost of his life. The fact that he would do that is very honorable. So my squire,
Chivalry has
that's my squire. I'll read that one from him. Let's see here, Carbra. It's not so much a question, but it's fascinating to hear about franchise and station and duty because what you expect of a peer is exceptional in a man at arms. The chivalric discussions show me a perspective you don't often get as a squire. Well, if you don't get his perspective as a squire, I'm failing. These are things that we try to share, whenever we go to uh, events when I used to go to golf wars, it was always fun to sit around the fire at night and discuss all these different things, stuff like that. Um, but yeah, now that you've attended this and, being my squire, you've heard these things a few times. Now you're going to have to start sharing some of these things with the other squires that may be missing out.
I'd like to
That's
re I would like to refer your squire to Sir Vitus's article, the, the Anvil of Virtue, which was literally written for squires as kind of a guiding path. It's about 24 pages of guidance for squires on how to comport yourself in the SCA and etiquette and honor and it's a really nice read. He goes to the effort of actually making it sound period-esque in his writing, which I really appreciated. And you can do a Google search for that, or if you message me, I could send it to you. Bright Price referred to King Rene Arjot in his book.
Anjou. King Anjou. King Rene is one of me and my wife's heroes because King Rene was as um, so he's a Renaissance man. He did everything. He was a fighter. He was a great ruler. Um, he had gardens. He was an architect. There's two of the castles that we love the most in the Loire Valley in France are Angers and Saumur, and both of those are King Rene castles. He wrote he wrote a book about the ladies, dedicated to the ladies, which is very wonderful. Um, I can't say enough about King Rene. Um, there's also a really, really good cherry liqueur named after King Rene. That's really good. Um, I don't know the next one you got there. Oh, it's just the rest of the sentence. Okay. So yeah, he made some big manuscripts and paintings and things of tournaments. When you see those big paintings with all the knights inside the fence and the ladies in the gallery and all that, King Rene himself drew those. And what's cool is I have a giant book of that, and the cool part is that it shows it with the fighters, but it also shows the fence and the gallery and all that with nobody there. And I showed that to Greg. I said, Greg, we got to build this. And someday we'll have a site we can do that. But it's nice to be able to see the framework of it, but without anybody crowding it all up there.
So
So
I was asking a question, going back to franchise again. If franchise is how we brand ourselves, would renown be heavily connected to the recognition of your franchise?
it would. So again, franchise is your bearing. So when a knight shows up at an event, as he walks out on the field, as he walks off the field, as he walks into the hall, you're witnessing his franchise, what he's wearing, who's with him, do all his retinue, are they all dressed in his colors, um, things like that. When you see that, and you see it over and over again, where they successfully, impress you with their franchise, they 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 have your renown. They have renown because you know who they are, and you look for it.
I heard it described once. I work with the VA hospital, and so I hear certain references. I'm not a veteran. I've served them for many years, but this is a reference that I think kind of parallels. Um, that there's a soldier and there's an officer, and you can see an officer by how they comport themselves. You can see it in how they enter a room and they scan the room. And you look at that officer as he walked in the room, he is carrying himself like an officer in the same way a knight would carry himself. I can't,
It's true. It's true that, and it's interesting when you go to a larger event like Gulf Wars or Pennsic, and you look. Doesn't have to be on the field. It can be anywhere. In fact, it's better if it's off the field. You go to the food court or something like that, and you see someone walk by, and you go, "Wow, look at that knight. He's impressive." And your friend goes, "Oh, he's not a knight." Wow, really? And then you see some guy walk by, you know, wearing a tunic and no pants and flip flops and a floppy hat, and you're like, "Is that guy new?" Oh no, that's Duke so and so. You're like, "Oh, wow, that's franchise. That's how they're known." You want to make sure you can be known any way you want to be, but make sure you're known the way you want to be. So some people want to be that person, and that's fine. And they have renown for that appearance, that franchise. Uh, just make sure that whatever you do, however you carry yourself, however you act, it's the way that you want to be perceived. The old expression, you only get one first impression, it's true. Uh, However, franchise, and especially in a group like the SCA where you travel and things like that, you're making a first impression every time you're out there, every time you're there.
Yeah, Ronan, if you look at the very last one, answers your question. It's not really a book, it's more of an essay. But Sir Vitus's article, it's just like a 24 page. Yeah, I guess it could have been a book. I mean, it's single spaced in small print. So, but it's got basically like two titles. But and if you want a copy, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Guillermo de Cervantes, and if you message me on Facebook, I'd be happy to share it with you. Actually,
Brendan,
what am I saying? I can post it here. I'm
Brendan, how long have you known Spivey? I mean, not Spivey. How long have you known Vitus?
Oh, probably 30 years.
Hmm. He's written a lot of interesting things over the years.
Yeah, he wrote the boot, the My Green Boot, which was kind of a satire, but it was well written. So it was actually pretty interesting. When he wrote it, it was effect book, but it was kicking. When the combat of the 30 at Pennsic started, he had the notoriety. I want to say not necessarily the renown of, and there's actually a manuscript. I want to say it's in Renee, where it could no, actually it's in Beecham Chronicles, but it's he went running around to the combatants, and as they were in a certain position, like if they were off balance, he would stab them in the rump with his dagger. And we laughed, and then there were a bunch of us that kind of looked at that and said, "He's can't get any more period than that."
Right.
Because we actually have the documentation of somebody doing that.
Yep. And Vitus was just a guy to carry it out.
Yep. Yeah.
I just uploaded the article in chat. So
yeah, he's an interesting cat.
He is. He's definitely.
As David Carter put it, he's an interesting man. He's definitely an interesting cat. A lot of fun.
What's his relation with Kit? Kit von Essinger.
Yeah, I want to say it's his brother.
I think you're right.
Yeah, it's his brother or his cousin. Kentucky.
Same thing.
Could be. Yeah, could be. Who knows? Who knows?
So it was my inspiration and my hope that this discussion with Sir Severin with our populace would help broaden our understanding of how we can apply ourselves in the SCA and maybe find a path to help us be better people in our lives. It's just another way of growing.
And if anybody sees me in an event and you got questions, don't feel free to stop me, ask me. I'll be at Res Centurius. I'll be at Coronation, all that kind of stuff.
The virtues are organic, and they can change and they can mold to the situation. So part of what we do is nice. Let's say as a questing night is to find that challenge of how those virtues can be applied in certain situations, but also as to how in your real life, where does that work? There are times I would love to be able to curb stomp some guy for just because I'm mad that day. Temperance says, don't stop. Okay, so that's a good example of temperance. Do we want to get on the bandwagon of, which is very easy with mob mentality and groupthink? Temperance says no. Let's take a step back and look at it in a different angle first before we jump into and make conclusions or take a side or whatever. And a lot of times, as knights, good knights, I don't want to say play devil's advocate, but they have to look at everything and all the sides to make sure before they make that contribution that or that they're going to step in and intercede in something, that they're making the right decision.
It's often that we're on the minority side.
Yes. And just always ask yourselves, where can I, in regards to the virtues, where do these apply, and how am I fitting in with them? I think Brian Thornburg made a very good metaphor, is that the list field is the crucible where our coin of renown is minted. And he had said that to me probably 25, 30 years ago. And that's always the list field, or the battlefield or tournament field, is the crucible.
No, who said that to you?
Thornburg, Brian.
Oh, Thornburg. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Brian Price. So, you can make a lot of damage and you can show your mettle and ruin your reputation and gain notoriety as quickly as you can gain renown. So always remember that on the field.
And like you said, sometimes you're on the other side. In fact, I was on some Facebook post about stuff going on, and someone mentioned Brian Price's book, and someone was like, "Oh, he did this. He's a terrible person." Blah blah. I said, you listen to me. I said, I've known him 30 years. He's a fine gentleman. He's generous. He's smart. He's this. And if you got a problem with that, you give me a call. You come find me.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Any other questions from the populace? Any other thoughts before we wrap things up?
I'm going to give everybody homework, if that's okay. Think about this. What is the difference between glory and renown? Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Welcome to my life, guys.
Do you want a dissertation or a short answer?
You can write it down and send it to him.
All right.
Guillermo, is there anything else we need to cover?
Any final thoughts from you, Sir Severin?
Just that what I'll do is I'll post up in Trimaris Populous some of the other books that I have on chivalry. As you saw from the photograph I sent you, I have more than a few. I have a set of dictionaries that are from, I think, the 1900s, that are ones on people, places, and events, ones on ideas and concepts, and it's literally just like you look it up, and you're like, oh, Henry VIII, boop boop, there it is. Okay, a falchion, okay, that's there. Anything you can think of is in these books. It's pretty cool. And it's just one example of some of the stuff that I'll put in there.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We had over 20 participants tonight.
Nice.
And I thank you, Sir Severin, for being willing to step up in this way. I think it helps us look at our lives in a different way. And I thank you to all the chivalry that turned out tonight.
That's great.
Great respect and honor for your participation and support.
I thank all the non-chivalry that showed up. Appreciate everybody that outside of the order. We're supposed to be following these things, but anybody else that wants to learn about it, you get double thumbs up from me. That's fantastic.
Right on. Thank you, everybody. I am going to stop recording.